At this hearing, interested persons may be heard, and written comments by the public will be received by mail or email. Persons who may require an accommodation can contact staff at 860-644-2511, extension 2329. Stephen Wagner, Chair, Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Dexter. So the way we conduct a public hearing is first we hear from the applicant, then we hear from town staff, usually our Director of Planning, Michelle Leip, and if the engineering department is represented, we'll hear from them. Then we open the floor to comments from the public. If you wish to speak either in support or have questions or you object to an application, you have to come up to the podium, make sure the light is on, sign in, verbally state your name, and then make whatever comments you have. After we've heard from the public, we then allow commissioners to make their comments. So let's start. Let me just mention that we have one vacancy, and Commissioner Bogonski is due to sit during the regular meeting for that. But meanwhile, during the public hearings, all the members and alternates are allowed to contribute. So the applicant for this Friends of Wapping Fair.
Good evening. I'm David Pryor, President of the Friends of the Wapping Fair. We filed an application to continue the Wapping Fair after the last group ended it off. The goal is to be consistent with the Wapping Fair of the last few years and build on that. I don't know what questions you have for me. Probably the best way for me to do.
Can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I don't know if you have any questions for me specifically about what we have, or.
Well, you gave, there are some materials that were given to us. Do you want to go through them at all?
Shoot. I don't know. Little learning curve here, or first public hearing. Thank you. Well, the fair is going to run with approval from Thursday, September 5th through Sunday, September 8th. Obviously not 24 hours. We've already secured contracts and agreements for amusement rides, water, tents for exhibits and hospitality, sanitary services, porta potties, waste management. The New England Doodlebug Association, which has annually used the fair, is on board with doing their event with us. We do have planned some live music, magic shows. We'll have food vendors, craft vendors. We've met with several town departments to make sure that we're in compliance with their regulations and what they need us to do. Basically what I have.
Okay. Anyone else from the applicant needing to speak? In which case we'll move on to the town planner, Michelle Leip.
Thank you. So this is a request for a 5-year permit to hold the Wapping Fair on the multi-use open area at the property located at the John J. Mitchell Fairgrounds at 75 Brookfield Street, Rural Residential Zone. The PZC had granted a 5-year permit previously in 2019 to the South Windsor Jaycees. This request is being brought to you by a new organization, the Friends of Wapping Fair, proposing a similar event to what was proposed previously. As was just described, you've been given a description of the events, including dates and times of the activity. We have a map that was used previously, and they anticipate using similar layouts as previous years. There was some discussion about serving alcohol this year, but my understanding that it's not going to occur this year, but it's something that they may want to consider in future years. So we may want to craft approval condition for future events if they choose to do that returning to the commission for discussion of that. The access and traffic patterns into and around the site have been reviewed by town staff and the fire department and police services, and they are creating an operation plan with police services and the fire, coordinating with the fire marshal as well as the fire department. You know, after the 5 years experience that we've had, they've got it down pretty good as to what works and doesn't work. A lot of what happens is weather dependent, as anybody that's attended the fairs. Sometimes they have to do some on the fly exit changes and things like that if it gets too wet out there. So there are 2 access points that do service the site for anybody that's been there. The primary entrance is off of Brookfield Street with the emergency exit off of the Troy Road portion of the site. That Troy Road is gated, but during the fair they do use it for for staff parking, and they do allow some of the different types of vehicles to come in there when they're setting up the fair. There will be no parking signs posted along the roadways. The Friends of Wapping Fair have to hire private duty officers to handle traffic control activities that occur on public roadways. I know that they're in close contact with the police as to how many officers may need to be present the day of the fair. We've had 1 meeting, and I know there'll be a couple other meetings prior to the event. As you are aware, there's no utilities currently on the site, so accommodations for bathroom facilities are brought onto the site. All vendors do go through our health department and do apply for temporary food permits. Inspections are done by our health department prior to the opening, as well as other inspections done by state fire inspectors of the rides. So there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes prior to the event opening. The 5-year permit conditions that we recommend include safeguards such as $1 million insurance policy for the town of South Windsor as an insured party. We do collect a $20,000 bond each year, and this goes toward the restoration of the fairgrounds. Depending on how much of the $20,000 gets used, really depends on what happens during the event and the weather and what it does to, to tear up the grounds. So that's something we have used up to most of it in some years in the past. Some years it doesn't get used as much, but it does get required. So recreation planning, public works, health, fire, police have all met with representatives from the Friends of Wapping Fair to discuss the logistics. And again, talking about this being their first year, kind of putting, the things in place that need to be done to make sure everybody's on the same page. So I think you'll agree we had a pretty good meeting 2 weeks ago, and the dialogue is certainly open. So I have provided you a copy of proposed approval conditions for your consideration. I do want to mention that the town recreation department, through some capital improvement monies and other sources, is moving forward with some projects to do some improvements to the fairgrounds. Those won't occur until later this fall, but things like water and potentially a new facility being put on the site will be coming forward. So you may see an 8-24 referral later this summer, and then my point being next year we may need to see a different map because there may be structures and water available that makes the fair shape up a little bit differently. So we might want to put an approval condition that as the fairgrounds change and any of the site layout changes, that an updated map come forward to the commission. With that, there are no other engineering comments. I'd be glad to entertain any questions you have.
All right, thank you. Now, members of the public wishing to speak either in favor or against it or having other comments?
Did you catch his last name?
Crier, I think. Hmm? What? Is that right?
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Warren. I'm the Vice President of the Friends of the Wapping Fair, or one of the Vice Presidents that we have. As you mentioned, the alcohol thing, and I see heads nodding and things of that. The concept of it was to have a local brewery. We haven't been able to secure all the things that would be going associating with that. We're not looking to have us doing it ourselves. We would want another organization coming in doing it, like, well, I'll throw them out right now. We're trying to get Connecticut Valley, but I guess there's a question about state permitting and stuff. So it was there's some sort of permitting that goes on with the state.
Yeah.
Apologize. So there was some questioning about like state permitting with Connecticut Valley being able to do it and having to go over to illicit. I was trying to keep it as much in town as possible. If we are able to find an organization that is able to do it in town, would that be something we have to come to another meeting, or would that have to just be in a temporary thing?
Okay.
Because our initial proposal doesn't have it. I was curious if you would be able to provide an
If we
answer
have
to that.
questions, we'll come back to you in a little while. Okay.
Thank you.
Doug Nation, 660 Main Street, South Windsor. This fair has been going on a long time, and they came to us at Revolutions and had a meeting with a lot of people trying to figure out how they were going to continue. The Democrats were there, the Republicans were there. Everybody was trying to figure out how to save this fair. So I think it's a great idea that these people have taken the initiative to move forward with a fair that's been around for so many years, and I just hope that this group right here and all the people in South Windsor will promote it around the town and get the volume of people that need to be there to make it worthwhile. It gets kind of scary when it rains and how much money they lose. So let's all pray for good weather.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Sonia Starkel. I just want to say that
I'm sorry, what's your name?
Sonia Starkel. I just want to say that we were told that this is the oldest running agricultural fair in Connecticut. We, as a group, really want to continue it. It might not be as big and bad as it used to be this year, but give us a chance. And it just gets the town on the map. The way we're trying to do things, the way we're trying to build it up, just the rides alone. $20 gets you in, gets you all the rides. We're just trying to do different things. Give us a chance. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, so we'll start with commissioners. Commissioner Baganski?
I have no questions. I think it's great. My only one question is probably for you. So I would assume there would be an addendum if there was going to be a consideration for alcohol. Will the insurance be updated to include like liquor liability coverage?
I'm not sure if that's so much to be required. I know that the police, that they, have had discussions with the police, and there may be some requirements the town has in addition than to be able to have served alcohol there.
Yeah,
I know it has in the past. I'm just not sure if it'll necessarily be insurance or exactly what would be entailed. I know there would be more police involved on the site from what our discussions were, depending on how it was being served.
And I don't have any issue with that. I would just think as a town, we'd probably want to look into making sure that there's liquor liability coverage just to protect all of you, and
Sure.
That would be it. Thank you.
Commissioner Willett?
No questions.
Paul?
I'd like to add some color to this application, if I may. So the Wapping Fair had been historically put on by the J.C.'s, and the fellow that produced it is someone that a lot of us know, Paul Petrillo. So to pick up on the last gentleman's comments, when the J.C.'s decided to discontinue it, there were a lot of emails and communications sent to Paul Petrillo to inquire if there was some way to keep it going. So he set up this meeting at Revolutions. I attended that meeting, and there were about 50 people there, people from both sides of the political aisle. I will tell you that Paul laid out a very, very detailed plan that made it sound like picking this thing up and running with it was like building the Roman Empire. And this group of people that are sitting here are taking a leadership role in doing that. All volunteers, right?
That's correct.
Doing it just because it's a good thing to do. It's good for the town. It's good for the community. So I'm blown away. I continue to get their emails with updates, and it seems to me like they are on track to pull this off. and it would be a minor miracle, so good for you.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Dexter?
Just to camp on what Commissioner Bernstein just said, I mean, we all, I think, are in full support. We're just maybe asking some questions to assist. And one of my questions is, you had this meeting at Nomads, right? And you had all kinds of folks there with some experience in putting on large events. Have you reached out to them since forming Friends of Wapping?
Yes, I have sent several emails to Paul himself. We've actually had some members of the J.C.'s
Okay.
contact us as well, just
Okay.
for information or with some friendly advice or
Okay.
what can I do to help. So,
I
yes.
understand. Personally, just having come off this past weekend, a very large event, be glad to chat with you about how it worked for us with a couple things. So maybe off the record, we can talk, and I can be of some help. But I really wish you all the best.
Any input we receive is very welcomed. So thank you.
What's that? Commissioner Foley?
I have no questions, and just my comment is, good luck, Godspeed, and thanks for picking up the ball and running with it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Viteri?
I second exactly what everybody was saying. I think it's great that you guys picked it up and that it's keep going. Michelle, I just had a question, and I know the sound system may account for this. On the second point, you said there's no alcohol proposed to be served this year?
I think it's up in the air from what I'm hearing right now.
I'm
So-
only bringing it up because the
Originally, they were,
document says there is alcohol.
they originally were planning it, and then before the meeting, they indicated to me that maybe they weren't going to. So I think that what they're looking for is the ability to, if they can get the proper licenses, if I understand correctly.
That's correct.
Okay, good. No, that's what I was hoping. It's just when you said no, it confused me, which is easy to do today. But thank you for doing this. I think it's great.
One of the things we're running into is we got a really late start when Paul handed it off, and getting the permit processes and getting agreements with the vendors, just to put it, what we're running up against. 86 days is opening day for the Wapping Fair, if approved. So it seems like we just celebrated Memorial Day. Labor Day is a little bit off, but for us, running the fair, that's almost like tomorrow, it seems like. Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Cavagnaro?
Thank you. I have no comments to add.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess I would say that when the announcement came out that you better stay up here, we'll have some questions. The announcement came out that the fair was not going to be held. There was just this big gap felt by every single person in South Windsor, and I think everyone is just delighted that you're trying to make this thing work. So I do have a few questions. You only listed the dates for this year. How are you going to work that out in the future? How are we going to?
We're going to try to stick to the traditional weekend after Labor Day. So I don't know what those dates are off the top of my head.
And there are a lot of preparation dates and follow-up dates that are associated with that, and you'd be willing to live with the same period in advance to get the site ready and the period after to get the site cleaned up and restored to whatever needs to be restored.
Yes, it usually takes about a week ahead of time and a week afterwards to set up and clean up.
I noticed your map didn't show any ADA parking. We need to make sure that that's
Okay,
taken
I did
care of.
include that in the ops plan to the police department. I'm sorry, I apologize that didn't make it onto the zoning requirement.
Okay. So I just want to reinforce, I think, what our Director of Planning said. There's a fairly high likelihood that the site plan that you presented to us this year will not work next year or in future years because of structures being built at the fairgrounds. So I just want to make sure that you recognize we're not approving this site plan except for this year. Obviously, if nothing happens for some reason, the site plan will probably work again in the future years. But there'll probably be a building in the middle here somewhere, and whatever
We could be flexible in future fairs, and including this fair too, if something comes up.
Okay. You have already picked up a number of financial obligations, both for insurance, for bonds. If you go do alcohol, you'll have to pay for police in advance. So how are you handling your financial obligations in order to meet what you committed to do here?
Through sponsorships and some financial aid from the Mitchell Fuel Company.
Okay, so you do have money in your bank account to cover
Yes.
these commitments? Okay. That's all I had. Does anybody else have any other comments or questions? Any reason I should keep the public hearing open on your part? All right, in which case, public hearing is closed at 7:23.
I just want to thank the planning and zoning as well as the board. Thank you very much.
We'll probably act on this later tonight. All right. Let's put that behind us. So the next public hearing is on the proposed changes to the electric vehicle requirements, section 6.4.10 and appendix H, which is 8.11, or 11.8, I mean. This is an incremental change. We've had a lot of discussion about the whole idea of whether we want to have EV chargers. So because Commissioner Willett requested an opportunity to present information about the whole big picture of EV chargers, we're going to have that discussion. Commissioner Bernstein also has a similar presentation, but in the end, our goal here tonight is to either approve or deny or modify this change to the electric vehicle charging requirements. So I would ask also, we've had a lot of information presented to us in previous meetings. We don't need to have it presented again. So we will now continue with the public hearing on electric vehicle charging. I would point out that the previous PZC requested the Energy Committee to come up with a draft regulation, which they did. There were some changes made in consulting with the staff, but this is basically given to you from the Energy Committee. With that, I would offer Commissioner Willett an opportunity to present his material.
Thank you. I'll be quick on the PowerPoint. The reason I wanted it produced ahead of time is so that I didn't have to read it word by word, but page by page. We really, in Connecticut, we have, well, South Windsor, we have 529 EVs registered in South Windsor. So we're talking about a mandate to satisfy 529 out of 18,544 registrations. Very small percentage. That may be going up. I'll explain that in a couple of minutes. Second is, we are already at our capacity for electricity in Connecticut. We are importing We're importing electricity from outside of Connecticut, from the New England grid. We don't have capacity here to continue to add burden to this system. For every 2 EVs sold in town, that's registered in town, that's the equivalent of building 1 additional house. So with 549 EVs registered, we have built 275 houses and increased the burden on the electric grid by that much. If we're going to force retailers and business owners to build EV stations, we are essentially charging people from out of town that are visiting our retail establishments and locations, which is further burdening the town's grid. I understand we don't own the grid, but we are dependent on it for large aspects of our life. I mean, we wouldn't be sitting here right now without electricity. So further burdening it doesn't really make much sense. It's debatable. I've seen studies on both sides. Alan, for your purposes, Commissioner Cavanero, I didn't use anything from the Koch brothers or whoever, the Murdoch family. All of the links in this presentation are from government websites. okay? So the cost per mile of EV operation is higher than an internal combustion engine, just the operational cost, never mind the acquisition cost. I've went through this before. Next page, the financials of mandating EV chargers. So we're looking at, for a level 2 charger, between $25,000 to $50,000 per installed unit, and there's all the stuff associated with it, and $100,000 to $200,000 for level 3 chargers. That is an indirect tax on every resident in South Windsor. These EV chargers need to be paid for. The businesses are not going to pay for them out of the good of their heart. They're going to pass the costs along to everybody sitting at this table and all of the residents of South Windsor. All right, so those are some of the major reasons that we'll get into our options in a minute. At my request, I asked for us to have presentations available and distributed in our packages. I did that last week. In the last 6 days, there have been 2 major developments that didn't make the deadline for this that I'll share with the group. The first is, last week, 6 days ago, Virginia became the first state in the country of the 18 that signed up for the California mandate that we're part of. So the state of Connecticut and South Windsor does not control any vehicle emissions or electric vehicle mandates. The state of California does. So we're being forced by the state of California to adhere to mandates that none of us voted for elected officials to enable that, all right? Virginia decided to opt out. They're the first state that's backed out. The reasons that were stated by the governor: in 2026, ACC2, which is the Advanced Clean Cars Act, ACC2, will require EV sales in Virginia to equal 35% of all new vehicle sales. That's the same mandate that the state of Connecticut has, all right? That will require a jump in EV sales from 30,000 units to 90,000 units a year. If the state of Virginia cannot achieve that, the state of Virginia fines each auto manufacturer $20,000 per vehicle sold underneath that 35% cap. Those costs are going to get passed along directly to the consumer. That is a hidden tax. Battery electric vehicle sales are decreasing, while the sales of hybrid vehicles, now being renamed extended range electric vehicles, or EREVs, are increasing. Why? Increased vehicle cost, range anxiety, time to charge, cost to charge, and this is my comment, in states with high electricity rates like Connecticut, including reliability of the charging network, worries about electricity availability during disasters, including brownouts, cold weather battery performance, and charging performance. Charging stations are more costly and complex to design and install than anticipated. And this is Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, stated this explicitly. In January 2021, Congress passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which allocated $1.7 billion to build 500,000 electric charging stations across America. The number of electric charging stations that have been built as of January 1st, 2024 equals 1. 1 electric charging station. All right? If the federal government can't figure it out, why are we mandating private business owners to take on this burden? Right? Second fact set that came out last week, and this is from Ford's CEO, Jim Farley, who is doing an interview. They actually just did, if anybody's interested in historic buildings, Ford spent $1 billion renovating the Central Michigan train station in Detroit. Absolutely astonishing. And in the middle of the interview about the history behind the station, and his grandfather helped build it, they asked him questions about EVs. And he indulged Barron's in this interview. And he said, in 2023, Ford lost $4.7 billion on the sale of 116,000 EVs, an average loss of $40,525 per unit. That's more than double the $2.2 billion loss taken in 2022. Ford's losses on EVs in the first quarter of this year was $1.3 billion, double the quarterly loss of a year earlier. Jim Farley stated in the interview that, EVs are not popular because of range anxiety, charging times, and charge experience, performance in cold weather, and towing range. It's less than 1/4 of Ford's F-250. Customers are not willing or able to pay the necessary EV premium, $10,000 and up for comparable models, due to a reliance on high-cost rare earth minerals and design and manufacturing complexity, and high costs of electricity combined with overall economic inflation. Because of this, Ford has scrapped their 100% EV plan in Europe. Number two, Ford has indefinitely delayed its plans for the next generation F-150 EV and the full electric vehicle Ford Explorer. Ford is redirecting its efforts instead towards EREV hybrids and expect EREVs to make up at least 50% of its vehicle mix by the end of this decade. The main reason the EREV eliminates the concerns around charging, the main reason is that EREVs eliminate the concerns around charging experience, cost, cold performance, towing limitation, and reduces the burden on the electric grid. Forcing businesses to install equipment is a hidden tax, again, that we are passing on to consumers and residents in South Windsor. For that reason, I'm suggesting that we, at the maximum, require conduit for future placement in the event that somehow EVs make a comeback.
Thank you. Commissioner Bernstein, you had also a presentation.
So interestingly, Commissioner Ouellette and I did not collaborate in any way on this. And I say that because what's interesting is I focus on the market and just the market, and Commissioner Ouellette focuses on the infrastructure. So collectively, I think we're getting a lot of good information. I want to explain my motivation for jumping in on this, because if you all remember what happened last time, is there was a lot of data presented and Commissioner Ouellette wanted a chance to respond to it. It was getting contentious, and I just decided to jump in the fray and use data that I was able to get to really show what's happening in the marketplace. The thing that I think about is there's been a lot of time and effort put into this initiative, none more than by the chairman. So with all that said, that's what the narrative says. The conclusion is laid out in a number of ways. It essentially says that in terms of the EV market, the train has left the station. EVs will be the future, but we've seen a slowing of the growth. And that's essentially what that says. So if you want to flip to the next slide, I'm looking at this two ways. I'm looking at it in terms of projections, and I'm looking at it in terms of historical data. Everything is sourced. I did note, Commissioner Ouellette, that it didn't seem like a lot of the information that I saw on your deck was sourced, although you did reference the fact that there are links. I didn't check out those links. But given that marketing is my background, I will not present anything that isn't sourced. So this first piece is sourced by a company called EV Adoption, and it's a projection. It shows their projection of the EV market, and they're calling out specifically two types of battery-powered vehicles, battery EV and plug-in hybrid EV sales, which are something along the lines of 97, 98, 99% of the market right now. So what you're seeing is growth, undisputable growth. Now, what I did on the next slide is I did the math to show the rate of growth. So you can see through 2030, it's a slowing, probably for a lot of reasons that was laid out by Commissioner Ouellette. There was a ramping up towards EVs through the pandemic, or up to the pandemic, I should say, and then kind of a slowing of the growth over the next, 10 years or so. In terms of historical data, and I come up with the same number that Commissioner Ouellette does in terms of EV vehicles in South Windsor, it's 529. So we're clearly using the same data on that. But EV registrations, if you can flip that, Josh. So this is registrations in Connecticut and in South Windsor. And this is 11 through 23. And you can see there's a mirror image between Connecticut and South Windsor in terms of the growth of the EV market, up to 529. And then on the next slide, I did the same thing. I'm showing the rate of growth slowing. And again, it's a bit of a mirror image where there is a growth. The pandemic certainly hurt auto sales in general. And overall, if I want to go back to my conclusion, one of the things that is noted is that there's going to be winners and losers. According to Cox Automotive, which is another source I use, the current state of the market reflects a reduction in pricing, increase in leasing, and uptick in incentivizing, with high-end brands like Cadillac, Mercedes, and BMW doing well, and some of the low-end brands calling out Chevy Bolt has halted its production, not doing so well. So that's an overview of the market. The last slide. This is simply showing what the brands are, and to me the importance of this is to say that Tesla essentially is the market. If we didn't have Tesla, there would be significantly fewer EV vehicles out there. Everyone else is playing catch up to try and get to it, get their piece of the pie, so to speak. I agree with Commissioner Ouellette's conclusion that the market should drive this issue. This is all about us as a commission coming up with some resolution about how we address the infrastructure requirements going forward. And I'm a firm believer in that the market should drive it. So if we did nothing, for instance, and a developer came in and put up a big retail store and had 100 parking spots, and there was a realization by this developer that there needed to be a significant number of those spots that were EV ready, then they would do it because the market demanded it. I will add just my own personal feeling about this, that the comment made last time about government should stay out of this, I disagree with that. To talk about the role of government in something like this, to me, seems selective and partisan. And I don't believe that we should be going there. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. So I will get back to the other commissioners, but first, now that we've heard the new information from these two commissioners, are there any members of the public who would like to speak on this? Mr. Nation?
I'm already in here. Well, first of all, this commission has always been wonderful to me. So I can't, you've always approved stuff. I've proven myself to you guys. So at least I thank you for all your years of support. This mandate, I get so frustrated with it. I was fired up this afternoon. You did an awesome job of explaining the EV market, and Mr. Bernstein, you as well. I have always been against you telling us as a business owner that we have to put electric EV charging stations in. Every time I do a project, we go over the numbers, and I'm always trying to squeeze $1. Everything has gone through the roof. If we're thinking that companies are going to be able to afford to put EV stations in, I think you are, you don't realize the other side when someone's doing a budget and how this could destroy a budget and just basically say, we're not doing the project. It doesn't make sense to us. But a couple questions that I wanted to ask, and I think, like, with does anybody have an EV car up on this committee? Oh, you do have any? Because I spoke.
I had one.
Okay. Because I spoke to a couple people today that had EV cars, and they said to me, and one, I won't say his name, but he goes, Doug, I have an EV car. He said, I love to drive it, but that's my third car that I take it. I said, well, that's kind of like having a golf cart in the garage. You love to drive down Main Street, but you're not going to drive to the grocery store. You know, it's just a fun thing to have. I have a hard time with certain people that have, and Mr. Wagner, you've been wonderful to me too, but I know that you're a big EV guy. And I think this is a question is whether a recusal from this argument of whether there should be mandates in the town. I don't know. That's something for you guys to decide. But there's definitely a conflict of interest. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know where I should go with that, but I know how supportive of you as an EV chairman you are. But as a taxpayer, a businessman in town, I think it's terrible to mandate a business owner to jump faith and hoping that he's going to spend this kind of money on putting EV stations in and wondering if anybody's going to charge their car. Or is there a liability with it? What happens if someone gets hurt charging a car? What if they get electrocuted? Who's carrying all this liability? And what benefit? I think you're right. The market will drive the EV. If the market's there, someone will build an EV station. If the town feels like they need to back EV places, then maybe the town should have EV parking in some of its parks or on its walking trails. They should put EV stations in and let the town as a whole pay for them. But to pin the cost of EV stations on private business, I think you're going to have some people deciding not to come to South Windsor because it's not going to work for them. And that's about it. So hope you guys make the right decision. But I think this whole EV thing should be squashed. We got talking about Ford losing money. You look at Hertz. They lost $400 million, and they keep on losing money, and they're ditching every one of their EV cars. Fun to drive, but when you're stuck in the mountains of Vermont and your car's on empty, you're going to be calling a friend in Connecticut if they come up there with their Ford F-150 and pick you up. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public wish to speak? Okay.
Good afternoon, Brian Warren. I didn't come here for this portion of this, but I have an interesting take in this. I went through a divorce and my credit score went horrible, and I had to get rid of my big Dodge Hemi 4-door everything. Never thought I would ever be in an electric car until Carvana said, hey, we can put you in 1, 0 down, $300 a month. I thought, I was like, no idea what this vehicle is. I get it. It looks like a tiny little clown car. It goes on a max distance of 85 miles. It's a 2013, so it only has the 24 kilowatt battery. So mileage and distance and the impact is very significant to me. If I go to Sturbridge, because of the hills, I have to recharge by the time I get there. It's 33 miles from my door to the exit in Sturbridge. If I go to Springfield, the hills aren't as bad. I can go there and back. Not a very practical car. It's a 2013. They've come very far since then. You're talking about putting in level 2 chargers. Level 2 chargers charge a car about 6 kilowatts per hour. That's, on ideal conditions, you're talking about 30 miles. Nobody's charging their car on a regular through those things because that's about the equivalent of plugging in at home into your dryer hookup, a 220 outlet. It's the equivalent of doing that, and that's what I do at home, and I charge my car there overnight. But going to a grocery store or anywhere else, you're not getting any significant charge out of those things. So if we're talking about a mandate for the town, I would say stick it to something that's actually going to make an impact, and that's not going to make an impact. A level 2 charger is not something that's helping it. You go to the charging stations around, you go to Manchester up there by Walmart, all the charging stations are filled up with people coming from New York to Boston because they rent an electric vehicle and they run Uber or Lyft or whatever the other car services things are. A level 2 charger is not making an impact in everybody else's day-to-day things, because it's the same thing as plugging in at your house. So as an electric vehicle driver, as one of the oldest electric vehicles there are in the area, the smallest powered ones, adding level 2 chargers is not going to make any kind of difference in my life or anybody else that drives an electric vehicle. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, now I'll go around to commissioners. We'll start with Commissioner Cavagnero.
Yeah, so I mean, at this point, I don't have anything else to add. Of course, I appreciate getting the presentations ahead of time. Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'll just save the rest of my comments for the new business. And I guess, actually, very, very quickly, if I recall, and either Michelle or Steve, you can correct me on this, this isn't necessarily what we're voting on tonight. If we do close the public hearing, we're not necessarily voting on expanding EVs, we're just clarifying the regulation. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's not changing the requirement, no.
Okay. So the issues that were brought up tonight, I would entertain either some commissioners to submit a text amendment to review the entire EV charging, because this is really just to clarify the language, adding definitions, anything that's been outdated. I think it was on Chairman Wagner's presentation, the very last slide, it talked about the 2024 changes of what we need to change in terms of what's compliant, what's not. And yeah, I mean, that's all I'll really say. After reading through the proposed changes, it was clear to me that not only that this is not really expanding it, but it's really just clarifying some missing holes in the current regulation.
Commissioner Vittori?
And I appreciate Commissioner Ouellette, Commissioner Bernstein, all the data and information that someday I'll completely understand. But I think you made some really good points. I think a good point that was made a minute ago, though, if we're mandating that a business that's moving into town has to put up charging stations, they have no control over who's using it. I think the point was made that you've got people going from New York to Boston that will jump off and use somebody's stand and stuff. So here they are paying for something that they'll derive no financial benefit from, which I think does become a consideration for anybody who's looking to move in here. I guess if we put in something that said that if you put a charging station into a business, then you could control it so that only people who go in and use your business actually use the charging station, then putting that cost onto a business makes sense. If you're just going to build a charging station for the public to use, I think then the government getting involved and funding parts of it makes a little bit more sense. It's my 2 cents at this point.
Thank you. Commissioner Foley.
Thanks again for the presentations. I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. I don't believe that this mandate should be pushed onto the contractors, the developers, that, you know, if somebody builds a new, they want to build a plaza that has a pizza shop and another food venue and a nail salon, that if they don't have charging stations there, it's the consumer's prerogative to go, I'm not going to go there because they don't have a charging station. So I don't think we should be mandating that. I think as a bit of a give is that conduit only, but not to mandate the installation of charging stations. And again, I disagree with Paul that I don't believe the government does need to be in all of our business, like the previous presentation where, you know, when we went from horse and carriage, as Mr. Ouellette said, that we went from horse and carriage to gasoline, the government didn't mandate gas stations. When Cummins teamed up with Dodge and said, I want to put a diesel engine inside of a pickup truck, they didn't mandate the diesel pumps to be put in at all the gas stations. So, and again, I think the town should be a player. I don't know how many EVs the town has. I know we have plenty of SUVs. I don't see a lot of EVs, and if we're gonna mandate something, then you gotta practice what you preach. And on our public properties, then maybe we should be, you know, we should have them here at Town Hall. that would encourage people to come to our meetings. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll skip the next, or Commissioner Dexter, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think they're putting one in at the library, aren't they? Michelle?
Yes, that's correct,
Okay.
currently.
2.
2 at the library? 2 is better. That's it.
Commissioner Boganski?
So I thought both presentations were really good. I am going to agree with Commissioner Foley. I think that I think the entire, and the way I read it and why we were still talking about this is that we weren't trying to clarify what the regulation, but there was a consideration on pausing the regulation. And so I'm in support of pausing what we're going to require.
Okay. If I could comment a little bit on some of the presentations. First of all, there was a question about whether I have a conflict of interest. I have opinions, and as an elected official, have been promoting this particular thing. I happen to believe that climate change is a big issue, and EVs are part of the solution. But I have no financial interest in whether or not the town or any business puts EV chargers in. So just to make it clear, I do not have a conflict of interest, and I don't think anyone here really believes that I do. The fact that I've advocated for something doesn't make a conflict of interest. Okay, so there were a couple of new things about this draft regulation. One is that we clarified that ADA spaces, or rather accessible spaces, van accessible spaces, do not have to be limited to handicap-only users, provided that the site has sufficient ADA spaces that are restricted to handicapped users. So that means you don't have a double restriction on that space. Much of the requirements, about half, there's a table in there that about half of the requirements for businesses are strictly limited to an estimate of the number of workers. So the idea is to make these available to workers who maybe live in an apartment and say, hey, I can take a job and I can have an EV. Again, this only applies to new sites, so I'll comment on that a little bit more. This is not a market-driven issue. This is driven by the government's concern from the federal and state level with the issue of climate change. So EVs are, the promotion of EVs, if it were just up to the market, nobody would be trying to sell EVs, I don't think. But the idea of promoting them fairly aggressively with regulation at the national, state, and local level is to deal with climate change. Climate change is a tremendous hidden tax on all of us. More and more we're seeing disasters throughout the country that are costing billions of dollars. Those are all coming out of our pocket. So climate change itself is a hidden tax. There was some question about distance, the older cars, the newer, I happen to own an EV. It has in the summer a range of about 260 miles. In the winter, when I'm using the heat and the chemistry of a battery is reduced by the temperature, I get about 140 miles, so that'd give you an idea of the kind of mileage you can get. The town has one PHEV, one plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, which they are charging at the annex. They actually charge that with a 120-volt plug because they can charge it overnight. Now, a typical user needs a car at different hours, so that isn't what they would be doing. I would like to comment a little bit on these presentations. First, Mr. Willette's presentation. Can you get back to that by any chance? First of all, the second slide, I think the data is correct. On the third slide, it mentions the average Connecticut household consumes 10,000 kilowatt hours per year. Are we talking about households, or are we talking about single-family homes?
It's a household, so the link at the top, I don't know why this converted it to PDF. When I sent it, I sent it from my work laptop, so it might have, anything it sends out.
So just the question is a household, would include an apartment, or is it a single-family house?
It doesn't make a distinction, so household could be anything.
Okay. I would note that in Connecticut, the Federal Highway Administration says we drive 12,000 miles a year on average. The US is more like 15, but Connecticut being a small state with things close together, we don't drive so many miles.
I could do the math for you if you want to get it to 40,
I mean, it's
43,
probably
4,400.
a minor adjustment to your calculation, but
Yeah.
we drive 12,000. We average about 38, 40 kilowatt hours per year when we're using a fully battery-powered electric vehicle. But also the PHEVs are also supported by this regulation. On the next slide, economics. EVs can be set up and are set up to charge it by time of day, so you can set them up to charge at night, so it doesn't increase the capacity demand of the electric vehicle. Plus, if people are putting solar in to compensate their EVs, or they're putting batteries in, that can help manage the impact. It's there. AIs, I don't know, we're not doing a regulation on AI, but I understand those servers can be pretty expensive or pretty demanding for electricity.
That's why there's an AI company that's trying to build a data center right next to Millstone.
Yeah.
So that they have unfettered power that is reliable.
I think we have to keep in mind that the technology is continuously improving, so any data we have on the demand now is already obsolete and will continue to be more and more obsolete. The renewables are going to be necessary to make this work. We're hopefully building wind farms out at sea. More and more solar is being built, so these complement the demand issue. And again, the actual cost, this is really a climate change issue. The government is demanding this, so let's see, one other thing on the
To make a correction on this, the government, the state of Connecticut is not mandating it. There's never been a vote on any of this. The federal government's not mandating it. Connecticut signed up to align ourselves with the California Air Resources Board. Unilaterally, the governor our last governor opted us in. So we are now at the behest of unelected bureaucrats in California that are setting our climate policy, our EV policies. All of this didn't come from the state of Connecticut. This
Actually,
came from
I
the
beg to
state of
differ.
California.
The state of Connecticut requires towns to mandate, in a statute that was passed by the legislature, requires towns to have a 10% on any new business or other facility that's built. So this is actually, we're not actually meeting that state statute with this regulation. So going on, you have to keep in mind these costs. We have installed 2 EV chargers at the library, a double charger for $29,170. That's a double charger, so that's $15,000 each. So they are coming down in price. Plus, we can charge for the electricity, and we will get money back from the electricity they use. We can use that to offset whatever it costs us to maintain and provide the electricity and so on. Your comment on the financials page, which is the next one, mentions backfill and patching. We're not backfilling and we're not patching. We're not digging these after construction. This is prior to construction. The whole idea of doing this before the parking lot is built is to avoid the cost of digging into an existing parking lot, which can be, as you point out, substantial. Those are the only comments I had on that. On Commissioner Bernstein's comment, the idea that the Chevy Bolt is production is canceled, they've actually announced a new version of the Chevy Bolt on their new platform. Basically, all their electric vehicles, all the GM electric vehicles will be on their new platform, and that should be a 2025 model Chevy Bolt, which will be one of the cheapest cars available, especially after you consider incentives. That's your choice. I think it's a very personal decision whether you buy one, but the whole idea of these regulations is to make it more feasible for someone to make that decision. Looking at, I think there were some comments about the rate of growth is slowing. I don't think that's a problem. I mean, I'm looking at Connecticut. I mean, your last slide, we have for the last 3 years somewhere between 41, 18, 55%, 41%, 47% compounded growth. So that is a definition of a very fast exponential rate of growth for EVs in Connecticut. Mathematically, that's an exponential rate of growth. South Windsor, same thing. It's even faster than exponential.
Yeah, so that's just.
Let me finish.
Sure.
Now, exponential growth can't go on forever, because eventually you get to, you know, the number of EVs would be 3 times the number of cars. Okay, so that's not going to go on forever. It is naturally going to slow as the forces that, as saturation starts to occur. But right now, in both the state and in South Windsor, we are in a rapid exponential growth. About every year and a half, we're doubling the number of electric vehicles. Okay, that's all I had to add.
So just a comment on that. The rate of growth is simply a straight formula of against the prior year. But the trajectory that you're seeing is consistent with every build out of anything that's new. I mean, if you look at the iPhone, you look at anything, there's this huge ramp up, and then over time, there's a slowing of that rate of growth. It's like the stock market can continue to go up, even though it seems to be. But with this, market conditions do interfere. So, you know, this notion of there's been incentivizing and there's deals and, you know, there's things happening in the marketplace that don't make the appeal of EVs as great as they were, let's say, pre-pandemic. That's the only point.
Well, okay, but we're still getting 40%, and then the next year, 40% on top of that, or 50%, the next year, 60% on top of that. We're still in that phase of a new market where it grows exponentially.
Right.
Now, eventually, that can't go on forever, and that will slow. That's normal. It's acceptable. But we're right now in the early exponential phase of this market.
Yeah, so I say on my first slide, the train's left the station. I mean, does anyone think otherwise?
Okay.
It's a type of vehicle that will continue to eat into internal combustion engine vehicles.
Okay, so with that, any other commissioners have comments? Commissioner Foley?
Well, yes, so I just want to be clear. So if somebody moves into town, I'm just going to pick a building. Let's say the building on Route 5, the eyesore from hell. Somebody comes in and wants to repurpose that building. That building's been existing. The infrastructure's there. They come in, they repurpose it. They are not required to do any EV, no conduits, no nothing. They're not going to saw cut, they're not going to patch, they're not going to do.
Depends on whether they tear up the parking lot.
Oh, no.
That's
we're
what
not gonna go there.
That's what the regulation says.
Okay, so
Okay.
I say we pull back on all regulations then, because we want somebody to come in and repurpose. The other thing, my comment is, when the town of South Windsor, any municipality or the state purchases anything, they go on a state bid. So they don't buy things at the same rate as Shepherd family or New Way or anybody else. They buy exponentially less than the general public. So let's not confuse that either, so.
Okay. Any other commissioners have something? Is there any reason to keep the public hearing open? Public, nobody? Okay. Public hearing is closed at 8:07. Oops, wrong agenda. Oh, that's the right agenda. We have the Pledge of Allegiance twice in our agenda. Thanks for moving it up. Now we have to delete it when we call the regular meeting to order. So we're calling the regular meeting to order. As noted, Commissioner Boganski is seated for our vacancy. Huh?
There's 7 of us here.
No, we don't. He's not yet
Yes,
a member.
he is.
No, he was.
He went through 2 meetings.
He went through 2 meetings?
Yes, he did.
Is that correct? I thought that his next meeting is next week. You've only been through 1 meeting, right?
Have you been sworn in by the town clerk? You would have to be sworn in if.
Yeah, so you're still not officially a member.
Yeah,
Even
I
though
don't
we
believe,
welcome
we
your-
haven't gotten a letter that we typically would get, so I believe there's still one more.
Hmm.
And again, he would have been sworn in by the town clerk if he was a regular member.
But, yeah, I think you're, I mean, I looked at the council minutes and you're on the, you were on the, what?
Called the first reading.
First reading was held for you, and the next one will be held next week. Okay. All right, so, so we now have the minutes for May 28, 2024. Any comments? I didn't find any. So we'll approve those by consensus. Now we have an opportunity for public participation on any subject not on the agenda. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on any item not on the agenda? Hearing and seeing none, we move on. New business. We now take up the application 2413P, Friends of the Wapping Fair Incorporated.
Chairman, I just wanted to make one correction on the sheet that I gave you. Item number 3, which talks about the police services. You don't have any attachment from the police services. That's the operation plans that's still being finalized. So that wording should get kind of tweaked, that it's subject to the final operation plans of the police. Thank you.
I have to find your. So would someone like to make a motion? Or should we have a discussion first? Either way.
I make a motion, we approve the application for the Wapping Fair for 5 years. Oh, crap, here we go.
Second.
Got to read the whole motion
Oh,
first.
sorry.
Yeah, here we go. Let's see, 5-year, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, permit to hold fair at John J. Mitchell Fairgrounds. Your dates and times as follows. Fair dates, September 5, 6, 7, and 8 of 24. Supplementary dates, pre-fair organizational meeting between Town Parks and Recreation and the Friends of Wapping Fair on August 7th. You want me to read all this? The whole thing?
Yeah, and nothing standard here, unfortunately.
Dates park will need to be reserved for vendor access prior to the opening of the fair. August 30th, 2024 will be the first day park is used to set up fair. Dates will need to be reserved for vendor exit and cleanup after conclusion of fair. September 12th of 2024, all equipment and cleanup will be complete. Date for a post-fair closeout meeting between the Town Parks and Rec Departments and the Friends of Wapping Fair will be September 25th, 2024. Following conditions shall apply. Number 1, the Friends of Wapping Fair shall provide a liability insurance policy naming the Town of South Windsor as an additional insured with a combined single limit of bodily injury and/or property damage in the amount of $1 million. The certificate of insurance will be submitted to the Planning and Zoning Commission to include off-site damage protection. Number 2, a bond in the amount of $20,000 shall be submitted to the commission to ensure that all town property is restored to the condition in which it was existed before the fair within 2 weeks after the closing of the fair. Surety policy included. Number 3, police services shall be the responsibility of Friends of Wapping Fair as outlined in the attached memo from the South Windsor Police Services.
That memo doesn't,
To be added.
to be added.
Okay, to be added. Police services will create a traffic plan for the fair. No parking signs shall be posted by the Public Works Street Services Division and enforced along Brookfield Street and Troy Road so that two-way traffic is maintained on all town roads. Number 5, there shall be a minimum of 500 off-street parking spaces. All parking shall be clearly marked. Internal parking and traffic control shall be the responsibility of the Friends of Wapping Fair. Roped walkways shall be provided for the safe movement of pedestrian traffic. Number 6, a minimum of 20 portable sanitary facilities shall be provided. A minimum of 9 hand wash stations are required at the bathrooms, and the ADA restroom or enhanced access room must be code compliant. Number 7, the Friends of Wapping Fair shall provide a dumpster of sufficient size for trash, livestock waste generated by the fair and the removal of such from the park premises. Number 8, temporary services are permitted by a licensed electricians. An electric permit from the building department is required and is subject to approval and inspection by the town. All electrical components must be removed and site cleaned at conclusion of fair. Number 9, emergency phone shall be provided by the Friends of Wapping Fair. A list of Wapping Fair committee contacts and phone numbers shall be provided to the town. A reciprocal list of critical town contacts will be provided to the Wapping Fair Committee. The Friends of Wapping Fair shall be readily identifiable as such while working on the fairgrounds. Number 11, all provisions of South Windsor Code of Ordinance, Chapter 74, Section 74-67 through 74-73 shall be complied with, ordinance included. The sale of alcohol beverages is permitted, subject to police services and health department reviews and approvals. Number 12, the primary access to the fair for workers and public is via the main entrance at 75 Brookfield Street across from number 90. Access to the site from Troy Road is only allowed for emergency vehicles during the fair and large truck trailers for rides before and after the fair. It is not open to the public. The gate at Troy Road entrance should remain closed during fair hours. Number 13, the Friends of Wapping Fair must contact the Planning Department and the Parks and Recreation Department each spring, advising us of the dates so that for that year and any changes that may be from the original approval granted. Site plan not guaranteed in future years as the town will be making improvements there.
ADA parking.
That was already in there. ADA restrooms. And at number 14, that there will be
ADA parking will
Compliant
comply,
parking.
yeah, will comply with the regulations.
to the regulations.
I still second it.
Are there any comments or other changes that people would like to see? Okay, in that case, we can vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Good luck. Okay. So we now have the PZC sponsored amendment. Mr. Cavagnero has stepped out. Someone like to make a motion?
Chairman, if I could just make a comment before you make your motion, just because I just want to make sure everyone's clear of what the process would be if some of the things were talked about were to be pursued. Because I heard a lot of like, we should get them out of the regulations, we should stop it or whatever. So just to clarify for folks, you have a text amendment in front of you that's a PZC-sponsored amendment. You could choose to take no action on it, and it could just die a death. You could continue to change it, make modifications to it or whatnot. If you want to do something like not require them anymore, that's a different text amendment. That's not what's in front of you tonight. That would have to be drafted as some other kind of text amendment to remove a section of the regulations. It would go through the same process we do for any other text amendment. We'd send it to CROG. It'd come back to public hearing. So if someone wanted to remove them, that would be the process. If someone wanted to put a stay on them or, not require them for a period of time, that would be a moratorium. So again, that would be another text process. You would go through a public hearing for those kinds of things. So there's a lot of options available to you, but I just want to make sure you understand the process part of it, because all that's in front of us right now is some minor changes to a regulation that's currently in place. If you chose to do nothing, the regulation that's currently in place will still be enforced because it's still in the regulations. So I just wanted to make that statement because, again, I wanted to make sure everybody's clear about where we are in the process with this text, because we've had a lot of other discussion besides what's really in front of you as far as the text changes. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Okay. Any other questions before we try to get a motion?
I just have a question, Michelle. If we were to stay with our existing regulations, and I apologize, I'm not all that up on exactly what it says. I've read it, but it just doesn't sink in with me. Can we insert a waiver for small business of a certain size or a certain parking lot size where they don't have retail? You know what I mean?
So again, right now you have some provision in there that allows for you to defer. I think it's a deferment kind of provision. But again, you can change the regulation any way you want. It's just not with what you have in front of you tonight. In other words, if you want us to take a look at it, let's just say that you don't make these changes or you make these changes and you still want to make further changes. Certainly it can be looked at further to try to reduce the scope of it if that's what you want to do. But you do have something currently on the books that is going to stay on the books until it gets removed or it gets changed in such a fashion. So I just want people to understand that you can't just decide we're just not going to apply it right now. That's not how a zoning regulation
and
works.
we did that with a couple of recent applications. We deferred.
You deferred them, that's correct.
So as an applicant comes forward 6 months from now, based on who it is and what they're doing, we could defer.
Yeah, I
that
guess the only
correct?
thing I would caution you about that is I think, part of zoning is consistency, right? So we don't want to be deferring one person and not another, because some people don't know that you will defer, you know what I mean? So I think it's a lot easier from our perspective, the people that are trying to help developers along, to have clear rules. Either you're going to require them, you're not going to require them, or you require them under these circumstances.
You're
so
absolutely
that's
right.
what I would encourage you to do rather
Okay.
than.
Thank you.
Yeah, one other thing, we do protect sites with 17 or 16 or fewer spaces or not. This doesn't apply.
Yeah, so you do have some provisions built in for small businesses. That was thought of when you crafted the regulation to try to not get the smallest of businesses requiring them.
And then the second table changes the calculation for retail stores, car wash, fast food, based on the employee parking estimate. Whereas places where people stay longer and including housing would have the full requirement. But again, housing that provides garages like the Tempo 2 is going to do, they can put 240-volt outlet in the garage and that counts for them. So do we have a motion?
I make a motion that we take no action on PZC-sponsored amendment section 6.4.10 and section 11.8 appendix H.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Just want to clarify, for this motion, if we vote yes, that means we are agreeing to not make a motion. If we vote no, it means we're not agreeing that we should not take a motion. Is that correct?
If you vote yes, it means you don't feel anything should be changed in the regulations at this time, and the regulation, nothing happens. If you vote no, then you feel that regulations changes or something else should be occurring.
Okay, thank you.
I would just comment that that means that current builders are required to put in the wired EV-ready spaces. And the current, it drops back to the current regulation, and this one gives them a break on that. It also gives them a break on the ADA spaces, so their spaces are more useful.
But is it fair to say the timeline is more aggressive?
It's the
Timeline does
same
not
timeline.
change.
It's the same timeline? Right down the...
Yeah, I mean,
Timeline does not change with this text.
if someone
Timeline
wanted
does
to
not
change the effective date of going to 10%, that would be probably a minor change that we could do, I think.
That was discussed at public hearing. If you wanted to do it as part of your text change right now, you mean like adopt it with that change? Certainly you could. Yeah. It was discussed at the public hearing. You could do that.
I mean, right now, we're in the 7% period, okay? That's the current regulation. And they're required to have 3% of wired spaces. If we make this change, they can have 3% of just the conduit. Okay?
Conduit only.
Conduit only.
Now, while we're having discussion, let's clarify, if somebody does do a renovation to a facility, and you talk about reclaiming a parking lot that's full of potholes and whatnot, so if somebody wants to invest in a dilapidated building, come in and try to make a go of it, if they fix the parking lot, we are making them do conduit.
So paragraph B applies minimum number of spaces shall be provided in accordance with the following tables and apply to new construction of sites with 17 or more parking spaces and to expansion of parking spaces or significant change in use resulting from rehabilitation of existing property with 50 or more parking spaces. That's the current regulation.
So
And that's
under that
pretty much this, okay?
Yeah, under that circumstance, the use would have to change as well as being over 50 parking spaces. So I don't think if it were to go in and turn into an industrial use again, you'd necessarily be doing that, so.
It says expansion of parking spaces or significant change in use resulting in a rehabilitation of the existing property. So if they add parking spaces, but don't make a significant change,
If they add 50 spaces.
if they have 50 spaces, then they
And
have
that's
to
the current, I mean, we actually had one site already come in with 49 spaces, and they were not required to, 49 new spaces, they were not required to,
I'm just targeting the Mestec. Kevin and I think, are on the same page. Like, the Mestec property,
yeah, by the way, you're not allowed to participate in the discussion, I
Poor
apologize.
Michael.
Yeah.
fair enough.
I'm so sorry.
Touche.
To Kevin, to your point, I think the Mestec property, if it were used industrially, would not trigger that. Again, it depends on what the new use of it were to be, right? If they were to come in and try to, let's just say something crazy, like make apartments out of it or something, you might have a new use that would trigger it, but an existing parking lot wasn't intended to trigger it.
If they're an industrial site now, if their use continue to be industrial. So we have a motion, and we did have a second? Okay. So basically, this motion is to say not make these changes. So we'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
No, I'm with a aye, so, yeah, I'm my own way. I'm a yes.
Let's take the roll call.
Yes.
Commissioner Cavagnaro,
Nay.
Commissioner Viteri,
No.
Commissioner Foley,
Yes.
Commissioner Dexter,
Yes.
Commissioner Bernstein,
Yes.
Commissioner Begansky,
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
No.
4 in favor and 3 against. The motion to take no action passes, as I understand it.
All right, we can move on in the agenda. Do we have any bonds? We do have some bonds here somewhere.
Yes, we have landscaping bonds and Inland Wetland Conservation Commission bonds. I'll start with landscaping first. Move to approve 22-02P, Hartford Land Truck Landscape Berm, amount 60,000, reduction 50,000, a balance at 10,000, and then 15-31P, CrossFit on Nutmeg Road, amount 1,000, reduction 1,000, and a balance of 0. That's the landscaping bond. Take a second.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Next.
All right, and then the last set of bonds, 22-22P, Hartford Truck E&S, amount 15,000, reduction 15,000, and a balance of 0. 22-22P, Hartford Truck Stormwater, amount 20,000, reduction 20,000, and a balance of 0. 22-04P, Chestnut Ridge Subdivision E&S, amount 25,000, reduction 25,000, and a balance of 0. And then 22-04P, Chestnut Ridge Subdivision Stormwater, amount 30,000, reduction 25,000, and a balance of 5,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Can you read all 4 of them? I wasn't paying attention.
Can I think we're pretty much at the end, right? Can we request to go downstairs? The acoustics in here,
Yeah,
I'm
it's
missing
difficult
half.
when we're having a public hearing, because public hearings do need to be recorded up here, but when we don't have a public hearing, I can request that we can use downstairs.
But aren't we recorded downstairs as well?
Yeah, but the microphone systems for, when we have any public hearings, they do much better for recording and for potentially transcripts that have to be created. You don't get as good a recordings downstairs, so. But I will request it. It's just, public hearings typically are held up here for those reasons.
Alternatively, could they give us some sort of a headset? Because I have found that the recordings are much easier to understand than the actual being here.
I
So-
can certainly request that. There used to be headsets back in the old days, so maybe that's something that can be re-accommodated.
Not to be a stickler, but didn't we were downstairs during public hearings in the past, and they were recorded in the past. Is it the quality of the,
Correct. It's the quality, yes.
And we also,
the quality of this room is, like, not good for.
We have a
my
town
end.
council member here. Maybe she can take note of your concerns and pass them on,
I was
because I
speaking-
have before.
No, but I was speaking with someone who's kind of not a sound engineer, but thinks he is, and he said that maybe there would be simply some monitors added that would maybe not be on the dias, but somewhere where it would just be closer to us for a minimal amount of investment.
I did talk to town manager as well as Scott, and we are having the same problem at town council. And so part of it is these great big monitors went up, and the speakers are not broadcasting backwards. So they are looking to put additional speakers or see what they can do, because, yeah, we can't hear either.
And it's not just the volume, Carolyn, it's actually the words. You know, I don't know if there's a better microphone.
It muddies it.
Yeah, it's the microphone is muddy. You're right.
I'll be happy to push it again this week. I just had this conversation with them last week. There for a while, I thought it was my hearing, and then enough people were complaining, I realized it wasn't just me.
I will put out there the idea of closed captioning. It's got to be the cheapest alternative, and some people speak fast, and it's going to require, but at home, we close caption everything. I have deaf kids, so we just close caption everything, and you can follow it.
Somebody has to be there doing that, though. Unless you can allow AI to.
Downstairs. Can Carolyn, can we put in a request for better recording equipment downstairs so we can stay downstairs?
The only other concern with public hearings down there is if we do have a meeting that's going to bring any amount of public out, the Madden Room is not really conducive for public being able to participate that well. So, we can gauge it a little bit at the staff level to know that. But that would be the other consideration that I'd want to have.
I do think that this is much more of an issue for planning and zoning than it is for the town council, just because we get so much important decision-affecting information from the floor. I know you have some of that, but I don't think it's anywhere near everything that happens here is coming from the floor.
No, I agree, and I will push it. I can never hear the town manager when he speaks either. It's a problem. But I will push it again this week. I did push it last week, and Scott said he would look into it, so I'll see what they're doing.
But I'm going to segue into 2 weeks tonight is our public hearing on our plan of conservation and development, and it will be held in this room because of, this is how TV monitors pick up things. This is a much better room for the public to see our broadcast from. So the plan of conservation development, we will be having a presentation, and I do anticipate public, hopefully a lot to come out and give us comments on it. So give me to July to get you downstairs, okay?
All right, so I'll consider that to have been old business. Do you have any other old business?
No, that was just, I wanted to let you know, with the POCD, we've been getting some comments delivered already to our office. We will be sending you out with your agendas, the public comments that have been received to date. They will be posted on our website as well, so that not everything will have to be read into the record verbatim, because you'll have received them ahead of time. So that is our plan, again, with any of that. So any of the public that might be out there listening, please encourage people to get written comments to us unless they're planning on attending and providing them in person. Thank you.
So any comment that's written will be put on immediately, and
Yeah, we put out our agendas about Thursday, so anything that comes after that will certainly come to the meeting and will be given to you at the meeting, but anything we can get ahead of time and put out there, we will do that for ease of, trying to
now just
streamline
review
it.
for us all the schedule with the town council. Are you taking this up on what date? Next Monday? Okay, so we'll have your comments for a week or so, at least, right? Or is it 2 weeks, whatever?
No, I've talked with Counselor Carey, and she's going to hopefully have a resolution to hopefully have comments for us for the 25th.
Okay.
Because that is the public hearing, the 25th.
Anything else that anyone would like to?
I just had one other question. I got an email from Nicole, I think it was today, about a mandatory FOI and ethics training.
Yes, so there's the Freedom of Information Training. Thank you for bringing that up. I believe it's July 9th.
But nobody on
I'm sorry, July 10th. I'm sorry.
Nobody on P&Z but me was I looked
Well,
for all-
Josh has had to send out to the commission. He was not in this afternoon, so Josh will be sending it out as well.
I'm not.
You must have got it from a different commission, maybe Public Building Commission or something. Yeah, no, everybody will be receiving that. There will be, the town attorney will be offering some training. If you're unable to make it in person, there will be a Zoom link that you'll be getting. It will also be filmed, so encourage anybody that can take advantage of that to do it. It will count towards your mandatory planning and zoning training as well.
Okay, anything else? Motion to adjourn would be in order.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?